Welcome to the Midlife Mavericks podcast, where we empower men in their prime to redefine what it means to thrive beyond 40. Join us as we navigate the complexities of midlife, offering insights, strategies, and inspiration to reclaim your health, vitality, and purpose. From personal stories of transformation to expert interviews and actionable tips, each episode is designed to support you on your journey to live the best life in your midlife and beyond. Get ready to unleash your inner maverick and embrace the adventure of aging with grace, strength, and purpose. My guest today is Guy Lawrence. I first met Guy in Byron Bay, where we would attend a weekly ice bath and Wim Hof breathing session. We quickly became mates, often hanging out at the cafe to work on our businesses, catching up for a surf, or training together. Guy is an open, honest, and caring individual. He's always smiling, laughing, approachable, and willing to make time for those around him. It's no surprise that Guy hosts a hugely successful podcast called Let It In with Guy Lawrence, where he interviews some incredible guests, experts in their fields who combine science and spirituality, along with everyday people who have transformed their lives by doing the inner work. Guy also co-founded Live in Flow and launched a set of programs designed to help people discover who they are and bridge the gap between the life they live and the life they truly want to live. Through weekend workshops, events, and retreats, Guy works to help people transform their lives, overcome pain, and experience spiritual awakenings. It was really nice to catch up with Guy and learn more about his journey and the work he's been doing. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Guy Lawrence, welcome to Midlife Mavericks.
Stretch Rainer, what an honor to be here.
Mate, it's been meaning to do this for a long time. Like, you and I have known each other, I think, since 2019, and we've talked about doing a podcast together, but it hasn't happened until now. But it's going to be a great episode, I'm sure.
No, thanks for having me, mate. I really appreciate it. I'm glad I'm somebody you thought about when embarking on this podcast journey.
Mate, high on my list, Guy. Mate, just to kick off so listeners can get an idea of who you are. If you and I were to sit on an airplane together, let's say we didn't know each other, first of all, where would that plane be going? Is there a favorite holiday destination, or is there a to-do list, a bucket list that you want to see? Where would we be going?
Wow. Well, the next plane is Bali, because that's where our next retreat is, and I've never been, so I'm intrigued because I've done a lot of Asia. But I got to be honest with you, I've really fallen in love with Croatia. And Europe. It's just magical. There's something, even though coming from Wales, it's funny, as you're somebody who lived in Europe, growing up with all these countries on my own doorstep. I never explored them as a kid. Really, it was just your token 2-week holiday when you go away. And it's taken me to leave and live in Australia to then go and enjoy or really appreciate some of the culture that's happening. And with my wife's background in Croatia and one of my business partners being Croatian, I that's on my bucket list to start spending more time there. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely, mate. If I had to admit, the best holiday I've had in my life was Croatia. I went to Croatia for 2 weeks with, I think, 8 mates, and we lived on a yacht for 2 weeks and just sailed around Croatia, and it was absolutely magical, mate. So
there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Part two of that question. So we're on this plane, we're off to Croatia. If we were to start up a conversation and I was to talk to you about maybe your purpose and passion right now in your life, what would you answer?
Purpose and passion. My purpose is to help others in a way while helping myself at the same time. I always say to open people's hearts, believe it or not. I think we live in a society where we're very mind driven. We live in a very technological driven society at the moment, which is very information based. And I truly believe it's severing us from our innate, natural, instinctive self as well, which I believe the fundamental heart is at the heart of it all, right? Which used to be a foreign concept to me. So I'd say that is my purpose in opening people's hearts and awaken, so they can awaken to the divine self. And then my purpose, passions, my family. I've just had a second child, young Ellis. He's like 13 weeks, and I have a daughter, who's nearly 4. So having that balance of being present with my family, I think being dad a little bit later in life has served me well in some respects, because I've kind of made a lot of mistakes before I had kids, and I'm being there for them as well. So those two things for me are the cornerstones, I guess, of my purpose in life now, and what gets me up in the morning and what gets me really excited is to ensure that I'm nurturing these qualities. So there's no like one, this is my career and this is when I come home and be a dad. I kind of just see it as a melting pot of life, purpose and passion. And I love the fact that they intertwine, and whether it's a Sunday night, a Monday morning, a Thursday, it doesn't really care. I don't really care about those things in my world. It's like each day is an opportunity to embrace it all, I guess, the best of my ability, with responsibilities.
Yeah, exactly, mate. It's living in the moment by the sounds of things.
I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. I'm getting a lot better of it than I used to, and maybe that does come with age as well. But at the same time, it's funny. A good friend of mine, his dear friend, they just found out died suddenly yesterday, and he's jumped on a plane and flown up. And life is fragile. There's these fragilities that are going on, and the human condition, I think we get caught up in our shit. We all do. I think that's just part of being human. But it's then becoming aware of enough and having the tools and the desire and the will as well to become aware enough so you can make changes and substantial changes in your life, or moving towards things that give you purpose, that give you joy. And it wasn't always like that for me. It's taken me a long time to get here. But when I look back upon my life so far at different decades and different stages, there's been fundamental choice points along the way that I followed my heart and not what the consensus of what people expected you to do. And quite often that led to more struggle, that led to more challenges. But in the bigger picture, that labor and working through those things and not resigning to something else that wasn't me has served me long term to be, I guess, in this position today. So none of it comes easy, none of it came naturally, but I think it's there for anyone if they're really willing to take the road less traveled and start to honor those aspects of themselves, which for me is then coming back to the heart and getting beyond that logical thinking mind that can get us into a lot of trouble as well.
I'm sure, mate. I'm sure. I think it's a very familiar story. Like, I think, a lot of guys would be going through life, maybe not being their true authentic self, not listening to their heart, not following their passion and purpose, following the norms of owning the house, having the mortgage, having the nice car, all these sort of things. And it can be a hard thing because of all the external pressures in our society. So I'm really interested to learn more about, your journey, like you sort of say, the changes that have happened over that time and how you've managed to maybe go in a different direction and explore, with curiosity, these different approaches to our health and well-being. So if we were to rewind and we were to sort of look at Guy at a younger age, maybe, growing up and teenagers, early 20s, like what was going on for you at that time?
Yeah, it was actually a really tough time in my life. I can vividly remember, especially stirring when I went into high school. I didn't because it's funny. I still wonder to this day, because when I was in primary school, I excelled in everything. I was top of the class in everything. I was always excited to get to school yeah, I was like a sponge, just taking it all in. And then when I got into high school, once I got to that 11, 12, like something just shut down in me. And I still don't even know what that was to this day. But this rebellious side started coming out in me. And I think kind of on reflection, it was the way the teachers are, the way you were managed, the way you're kind of cattled around from class. And then if you're no good at this, you get put, there's just so many dynamics going on. And I rebelled, and I remember there's a deep unhappiness starting to set in even back then. So I spent more time not in school than in school, and coming out of school with no GCSE qualifications or anything through that rebellion. And, I was working in a nightclub by 15 years old. It was kind of so loose. I look back and think, shit, how did I get away with that? Like, my dad worked away a lot. My mom, was working at the supermarket to make ends meet. And, they were very challenging times, and for the want of a better word, there's a lot of lack in our life in those things. But I always had a lot of love, through my parents and stuff. But so there was this kind of niggle that was constantly there. And then I ended up getting an apprenticeship as a plumber. It was the middle of recession in the UK. So I went on a YTS scheme, which paid you £30 a week for like literally just being slave labor as a 16-year-old on a building site. But I had enough nous in me to keep that going, to think, shit, okay, I got no school qualifications. Some of my mates are already thieving cars and bloody going off to raves and they're 16, 17, and it's like, I don't want to be a part of that. And I stuck it out, and I was playing rugby. So it's common, like culture you just get born into this way of life and you just get swept along with it. But there was this nag that was just building and building and building. And funnily enough, there was just this catalyst of events of my rugby, which I was pretty good at. I don't know how far I could have taken it, but I wasn't bad. But so I turned up for rugby every week and really give it my all. But there was this catalyst within my rugby club over a particular couple of people within the club, falling out with my girlfriend and then falling out to the love of my apprenticeship. And when my apprenticeship ended, I quit my job, quit my girlfriend, and quit my rugby in the space of a week and a half. And it was a huge decision for me, but it was just bottling up with me, and I didn't know what to do, where to turn, and it bubbled out in these actions. There wasn't a lot of thought given into it, but it was like, I just can't do this anymore. And what that actually did, though, was I ended up working in London and leaving Wales from that. But it kind of then reinforced my unhappiness. And I remember going through a 6 months, 8 months period, or even a year of just being deeply unhappy, deeply like heartbroken from leaving my first girlfriend of 2.5 years, leaving my life as I knew it. But every time I went back to Wales, I just didn't feel like I fitted in anymore. I couldn't understand why. Nobody had given me any guidance or showed me or how to deal with emotions or anything. So I guess that was my first choice point. That was my catalyst. So I knew what I didn't want. But I didn't know what I did want, and I didn't know what to do with it either. So it's like the saying I heard once: you can motivate an idiot, they just do dumb things faster. And I thought, well, that could be me right now. You know what I mean? I'm just getting motivated to do something like that because I just didn't know. So I saved up and then came to Australia as a backpacker. I guess that was the first bits that allowed me to break out of the norm or what's expected of me. But at the same time, there was a long stage of then restlessness and unhappiness within all of that, trying to figure out,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's that point of life, I suppose, going from a boy to becoming a man, and we're trying to decide what we're going to do with our lives. And there's just, I think, so many options, but I think we just sometimes just get pulled in the direction of where society wants us to go and how we believe we should live our lives. What brought you to Australia? Like, what made you decide, okay, well, Australia's got to be the place for me to go to now? Were you running away from stuff, or was there something that inspired you to come?
Yeah, no, my sister was out here. So my sister had been here a year. And I guess Australia always seemed, you grow up watching Neighbours on TV and Home and Away and shit like that. I mean, this is way before the internet was really a thing and that, and just this romantic idea of beaches and hot weather and Sydney Harbour, and like it all looks so like almost so far out of reach, because growing up in the valleys of Wales, it just felt like you might as well be on another planet, mate. Like, you know what I mean? So I think there was just this seed in me there. And I always remember when my sister got here before me, I was kind of so jealous, because it was like, oh, I always thought that would be me first, not her. You know what I mean? So that was the only reason. And I was running away from life. I didn't know how to deal with anything, and I had this belief in me even then that, well, what am I going to do in my life? Am I capable of doing anything more than plumbing or working in a nightclub and having no qualifications? Because you grow up and you're taught you must get these GCSEs, you must get these grades. And if you get these grades, then you go to university. And then if you go and spend another 5 years in university with these qualifications, you can then go and get a job. And the harder you study, the more money you're going to earn through your career. That's the kind of steps. And in my mind at that time, I didn't follow any of those steps, because I couldn't even relate to why would I do something I'm not happy in, or why would I dedicate my life to something that's not going to bring me joy, And I think because I never was around people that really loved what they did, and joy, it was always work hard and get money. So that was just my perceived belief systems at those stages in my life. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I get it, mate. Like it's a similar story. I worked in corporate as well, and then just absolutely hated it and had to break free of that. And I think it's a hard thing to do. Like at the time when I did it, my mates all thought I was crazy. Like, what are you doing, leaving this job, leaving this life, and to do what? So I can definitely relate to what you're doing there. When you landed in Australia, like what happened then? Like what was the next step of you figuring out your life and taking the steps forward?
Well, that took another 15 years, because I like, not wasted years, but it was just a mess, mate. Like, when looking back, I was just thinking, Jesus Christ, I was so riddled with insecurities. I just didn't have confidence in me, even though from the outside looking in, you might think you did. Like, I was a big guy. I was nearly 6'4", playing rugby. It was just like, it was all a facade. And I was out here backpacking. I was dating an Aussie girl, and all that was kind of new and novel compared to the Welsh boy in the valleys of Wales. And I was just doing office furniture removals and working in a pub and just winging it. And then I was laboring, winging it. And the next thing you know, 3 years had gone by and I was still in Australia. And then immigration finally got hold of me and asked me to leave politely, really. And I got caught up in this kind of false illusion that if I can get myself back to Australia, I'll be happy. I'm not happy here. There was some good things about Australia, but the reality was, mate, I was completely lost. And there was nothing more than a worse feeling that no matter where I took myself or went, I took myself with me and all my problems with me. So you can go to Nepal, you can go to trekking, Chiang Mai and Thailand, and hit Koh Samui for a month. And I did all these great things in Cambodia. And the reality was that nagging feeling was there the whole time. And as I got older, it was like, well, how long do I do this for? What do I do? And long story short, I was getting close to 30, which was the cutoff point in to emigrate in Australia with maximum points, not the cutoff point completely. So I applied for residency for Australia, failed, and then reapplied again just before my 30th birthday, and then got in that time. And that's when I emigrated to Australia. And even at that stage, it was like, I'm just going to roll the dice and see if I can find something new. And that's when at the point I was working in Newtown in a bar called the Town Hall, and decided I would study fitness training and become a personal trainer. And then I was stock trading the stock market at the same time with some money I had. And I thought, I'll get these things going and then figure out what I'm going to do from there, essentially.
What a roller coaster, mate. You're just getting pulled in so many different directions, and obviously you're still trying to find your feet. I'm surprised they let you back into Australia, really, but I'm glad that they did.
Yeah, it's like you know, it's funny how you can look back in yourself and sometimes you wish you could go back to chat to your younger self and just say, mate, just move yourself a couple of degrees that way and go that, you know, and you accelerate maybe the path that you find yourself on and stuff like that. But I think to be able to cope with some of the decisions later in life I've had to make, to be living on purpose, to be actually, I guess, have balls enough to think that I could go and run retreats and events and pull, you know, more and more people together and work them, help them, support them through their own inward journey. I really had to go through that. And because the fact that I had to figure it out for myself, there's been innate wisdom that's come from that unless I'd gone through those pains and challenge, like funnily enough, my t-shirt, I grabbed it.
I was just reading that, mate. I was going to make a reference to that.
It says no pressure, no diamond, right? And it's so true. So even though you could say there was a good decade of deep loneliness, sadness within my essence, my being, even though I had mates around and things like that, that it's now in reflection coming, you know, being closer to 50 years old and having a family and like there's such a deep sense of peace and gratitude for my life right now and what I have. It's diffused all the materialistic things we get seduced into what we should have and be, so to make our self-esteem feel better and fit into, like, all that's just, for me, is just fucking just nonsense. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, what really matters. And, you know, at the end of the day, when we come to our last breath in life, what is it that we're going to be really reflecting on the person that we've become? Because all the materialistic things are just that. They're just materialistic things, you know? And we've got a very warped perception of what actually matters in life, I think, and value. So, yeah, I am grateful for it, even though at the time it's just horrendous.
Yeah, I really want to switch gears and I want to talk about this sort of inner journey that you have been on and you've had, and obviously you're helping other people go on the same journey now. But just before we jump forward there, you just sort of said if you could talk to your younger self, like what advice would you give to your younger self now if you could give that advice?
Boy, it's challenging, isn't it? Because they've only got so much capacity to take in that information at the same time. But I think I would be focusing on the inward journey that I wasn't doing until my late 30s. So been doing that then, to really start to dissolve the illusion of what we think really matters. And that is then starting to look at and focus on what really matters, you know, which is nurturing that sense of self, how to dissolve a belief, how to start actually exploring the inner landscape. You know, I'd probably just give him a book and just say, read this, you know, and hopefully take it on board or something. It is hard to distill that wisdom until you kind of go through it all yourself and come out the other side. But basic things like, you know, even just what supports your general mood and well-being through not only exercise, but the way you eat. I mean, you spoke about it earlier, right? I would find a mentor. The sooner I wish I had done that sooner in life. and actually invested my money instead of drinking it, pissing it up against the wall because I felt lonely inside, and that's what all my mates were doing. I would actually be funneling that money into mentors and people that could see the potential within me and nurture that out of me in a different direction. It's probably a long-winded answer because I didn't have a clear answer, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think like in what you said there, and then like where our conversation is going to go now, I think it'll sort of sum it up nicely. So if we were to look at this inwards journey that you've had, like obviously as a youth, you've know that you're not heading in the right direction. You can feel something's not right. You're sort of running away from life. You're trying to find yourself, figure out who you are. When did this inward journey start for you? Like really start moving forward?
I think when I re-emigrated, when I finally got my residency for Australia, that's when I think I was starting to explore different aspects. That's when I got into Tony Robbins. I remember listening to his Unlimited Power 2 CD series. It was a 30-day course, and then that sparked off something in me that started leading me into checking out Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle. I vividly remember having them on audiobooks. I think I still had a cassette back then. There was mini discs and CD players. It's all a blur. And then starting to explore those aspects of the self. And it was starting to, I felt like the way they spoke, it's almost like there were other outliers in the system. I always think that Steve Jobs had, about the outliers and I can't remember how it goes now, but that they got it. They actually got it. And so there was a connection there to what they were saying, which led me to exploring, trying to figure out meditation, things like that. And to be honest, the real turning point was when I decided to do a shamanic journey, an ayahuasca journey, because by this point in my life, I'd kind of been meandering on, exploring all these different aspects. And I guess you could say I was a dabbler and really open to it. And I was reading books, but it was still all the head stuff. It wasn't fully experiential. And I would always wonder, is this possible? What these guys are talking about? They're talking about like there's a field of information that's beyond our sensory experience that's giving rise to all physical form that you see, and that you can start to develop this relationship and develop your experience with the universe itself, if you like, beyond your five senses. But in order to do that, you have to start to cultivate a practice and start to heal your inner wounds and all these different explorations. And it's like, shit, like it all sounded so foreign, but kind of made sense at the same time. But you're always skeptical because in mainstream, nobody ever talks about this shit. And which still blows my mind to this day, because it's, for me, it's a critical part of what true healing is all about. So through those explorations, then I came across a good friend of mine, two good friends of mine who I used to live in London with. We're going to do a plant-based ceremony in Europe called ayahuasca. And I was going to be in Europe at the time, and they were like, you should come, we should be doing this together kind of thing. So I explored that shamanic journey as well. I don't know if that's something you want to go into in the conversation today, but that was a huge step for me to do that, because I had a huge amount of trauma from taking magic mushrooms as a kid, which then negated any kind of drug abuse through my teens or adulthood. I didn't really touch any of it. And then to actually go back and visit the most powerful psychedelic in the world was, terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. But through that terror, it was starting to reveal what trauma was in my body, what it feels like, and how to negate that trauma or work with it. And by the time I, did the ceremony, had these very profound shifts, which then, I guess, made a lot of things that I'd read about in books not just knowledge anymore. This was actually based from my own experience, which is, I think, critical when leaning into any kind of self-development work. We should never take anyone else's teachings just as gospel. It needs to be a self-exploration, and they're kind of signposts.
Yeah. You spoke there of like the feeling of trauma. Like, can you describe a little bit of what that feeling was? And then when you went and did this experience, this ayahuasca, did it help you release that trauma, or what did it do for you?
Yeah. Okay. So the feeling of trauma, I mean, that could conjure up many different things for many different people and many different experts on trauma. But for me, basically, it's the body reliving an event that's stuck in the past in the present moment. So we start to create feelings of something, and we might not even be conscious or even remember the event. The event could have happened way before, could be from a baby or early childhood, and we can't even imagine it. So what happens is that then when we start to, once the body, the body is this incredible biological wonder gift that we have that is so incredibly smart and wants to keep you safe. So if it starts to relive itself, what we then do, though, is impose the current circumstance or things that are happening in our life in this moment upon the feeling of the past. So all of a sudden we got a projection. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we can then start to project it onto a person, or somebody's triggering you, or what are these people, and then we get seduced by the story that we're telling ourselves, and they can actually be not even related to each other. So when I had actually made the decision to do the ceremony and start to create change in my life, all my unconscious beliefs and traumas started to freak out and bubble to the surface. So all of a sudden, I'm starting to get paralyzed. I'm starting to get shortness of breath or headaches and soreness in my shoulder or my body, because trauma that is held from an energetic aspect that has not been dealt with within myself is starting to quicken, I see it as, and start to come to the surface. Now, if I wasn't self-aware, I would then just say, well, that's going on because this out here is going on. That's the problem, not me or what's happening within me. So I hope I've explained that. So then the key is that's where the work comes in. That's where self-awareness comes in. And that's where actually starting to separate and decompartmentalize the very things that are going on and have an objective view as opposed to a judgmental view of what's happening in the moment. And that is where the rubber meets the road, but also where the gold is.
Yep. That's amazing, mate. It's a really fascinating sort of story. So when you left there, like you talk about the work to be done, like after that experience and you're leaving that, like what's going on in your mind then? And like what were the next steps that, sort of started to happen in your life?
After
Ayahuasca.
After I've done the ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Okay. So all I could say, the ayahuasca was a very spiritual experience for me. The greatest lesson I took from that night, and you could do a podcast on just what happened, but the greatest lesson I took from that night is surrender. To fully surrender. Now, to put that into perspective to anyone listening to this, what does that mean to fully surrender? It's not to give up, but it's to relinquish control to outcome and to be fully present. So it's like if you've given your notice for your job tomorrow, you're not going to have any money coming in. Can you fully surrender in that moment and accept and not let the mind race into all the problems and the challenges that might arise that are coming in? Like there's a surrender. And ultimately, the ultimate surrender, it keeps coming back to our last breath. Can we fully surrender into the moment when we cross over? Like, so when you start rewinding back, there's an innate fear of the body survival mechanisms that come forward in that. and it's being able to let go. And it's being able to start to be more comfortable in no matter what the external world is projecting upon you, to surrender, to be present in that moment, here and now. It's not to be numb or devoid or ignorant of what's happening, but it's to fully embrace and accept. So for me, I had to accept the fear and surrender into that in that moment and be okay with whatever was to arise. So then if you start to have an experience like that and a connection to the universe, like we forget we are like 8 billion people running around on inhabiting this planet that's hurtling through the universe. So when you start to look at the universe as a whole, and that we are then part of the cosmos and part of its existence, that there is an interconnectedness there. And if you experience that and feel that, you only need it one time. You've then got a reference point. You then kind of know where you're looking for when you close your eyes and you go back inward later down the track. So all of a sudden, I'm not seeing myself anymore as this small, tiny, little individual human flesh meat suit that's fucking caught up in all his loneliness and shit and depression. And poor me said, all of a sudden you just had a sniff behind the curtain, seen yourself from this different vantage point, fully surrendered into it to get there, to experience it, and to know what it meant to fully trust and surrender and let go into something that's far greater than you and I, but it is you and I. You come out, how can that not change the way you think, the actions, the choices you're going to take, the actions you're going to take, the way you interact with people, the way you interact yourself, the way you talk to yourself. It's like, for me, it was like 20 years of therapy in one night. Like it kind of felt that kind of way. And then it was very visceral. Now, don't get me wrong. When I then came back to Australia, I was knee deep in my supplement company by this point, and kind of thinking I was achieving it, and I was like, fuck, I've got it all wrong. It's still, but when you kind of have that innate, what's the word? I guess knowing inside you. It's not just a belief. It's a knowing. Then it's like your roots of your oak tree just get deeper into the essence of who you are, and you stand tall and strong, and you start to stand up for what you believe in more and represent, and then you realize all the bullshit that you were seduced into is that it's just bullshit. It doesn't really matter, and then you just give more energy to the things that do, and over time they grow.
Yeah. The surrender that you have there, like it's before you went to ayahuasca, like just backstory again, you've grown a business, you've got this supplement company that you were running in Australia. You're doing really well out of it. You've probably got the nice car, the nice motorbike, all these sort of things. You're following, I suppose, this idea of like, being successful, male figure, climbing the corporate ladder, whatever it is you're doing. And then you've gone into this ayahuasca event and you've learned this idea of surrender and just being more present and going internal. Like, how did that change you when you came back to Australia and back into the life that you had? What did it make you really think about more?
The first word that just came in then was authenticity. And it's like the way I kind of live my life to this day is like my heart is the compass. If you like, not my brain, it's the heart. And it sounds cheesy, but if you stay true to yourself and everything within your life as that's true to you and authentic, then life for me is just filled with peace and joy. And it's when you start telling yourself the lies. It's when you say, like, whether it be a relationship with your food. For me, it was my relationship in my business, with my business partner, and what was starting to happen, like the cracks were appearing. So then there's authenticity, and then there's what you tell yourself. There's truth, and then there's the story you tell yourself. And when you start to get closer to your heart and your truth, and I think this is why most people are so terrified initially of going down this path, because it really is like lifting up the rug and giving it a good shake and seeing what shit really wants to fall out. You know what I mean? So it's like then I come back to Australia and you go, okay, I can actually preempt what's going to come 5 years from now by starting to action what I know in my heart needs to be done. Or I can continue to keep myself busy, continue to just seduce myself with the Ducati. You forgot to mention the beach pad too. I was living in a beach pad in Maruba at this point as well, right? Or you can seduce yourself with these things and know at some fundamental level you're living a lie. Now, just like the inactive, I don't have stereotyping you, but if we're constantly eating fast food and we're constantly knowing there's a part of us deep inside that we're just ignoring, screaming at us to say life's got to change, and we go, no, I'll keep pushing the other way. It normally comes up in a physical manifestation eventually of some illness or chronic disease or things that we suppress. Well, emotions are no different. And so if we're then really wanting to honor our heart, but our soul and how we want to live our life, then we have to start actioning it today. So for me, when after those experiences, I could just see the cracks appearing more and more. And at first I ignored them again, mate. I'm like, they actually feel so fucking big. I'm just going to go for another 6 months here before I'll address them. But at the same time, a few years earlier, the universe had slapped me around a few times for not listening prior. So I was dumb enough to just push it out a bit further, but wise enough to go, okay, no, like things are really starting to happen here. So I'm going to preempt it and make the decisions before it all goes Pete-tong, which is what I didn't want to be in.
Yeah. That's an incredible story, mate. And it's a tribute to yourself for being able to sit back and see that, like plan the future, look at the future, see how your decisions or your choices right now are going to have a huge impact on your life going forward. And whether that's with your physical health, your mental health, all the things that are going on for you. I think a lot of guys struggle to do that. We might see where we're heading, but it's just hard to get off the tracks. We're stuck in that sort of one direction. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to be able to step away from that, which is what you've done now. And it's, you've got your own business, you're helping other people on this mission and on this journey. So can you talk to us a little bit maybe about that?
Yeah. So ultimately, I run retreats and workshops, and we do online coaching. So, and that's in service of that. So what happened for me, the messaging was coming through so clear for me in terms of when I was still in the supplement company of I'm going to action these steps and preempt it, like I said, taking forward and actually fully trust and surrender, which I had to do when I sold out of my partnership and step into the unknown. But I did it because I knew in me there was something so, like there was a magnetism, there was something pulling me so towards this direction of what I do now. I would have been silly to ignore it, really. At the end of the day, I might from the outside be like, fuck, you took this big leap of faith and things like that, but I can't even explain it. It was so innate in me. I just, if somebody else could feel that experience, feel it, they'd be like, what are you thinking about? Just go do it. You know what I mean? So there's that aspect, first of all. And within me, it's always been innate to connect with people and help. Like, it's just in my nature. I'm just like, I like to think I'm just a nice guy. Like I'm just a simple guy from Wales that loves people, and if people are good, it's great, and through all those difficulties and challenges, I think, and I can't look out in the world at the moment. I'm I'm very empathetic. I can connect with people and feel them and just say, oh shit, there's me right there. That's where I was. If they only just did this, this, and this, boy, they could really change their trajectory. But obviously, they're not ready yet, or whatever that might be. So, that pull was to make a difference in the world, or at least a ripple effect to what my children are now stepping into. What legacy are we leaving behind for them? And help people move past the traumas, and we all have them. Anyone that's human has trauma at some capacity, and help them on an inward journey, and ideally have a spiritual experience, have a connection with the universe, divine, God, whatever you want to call it. That if you start to nurture this aspect of yourself and have those realizations like I did, in the terms of that we are not these just small little this was the unworthy part of me. I'm just this little insignificant human just trying to make it through life, to like, wow, I'm this divine, powerful, incredible being that really can live life what my heart desires and have more purpose and more meaning and more connections in my relationships and whatever that might be. Then it is possible if we were willing to lean in that. So that was my mission, to go, right, how do I marry that up? How do I go out and set out to people and structure in such a way that if people are ready to step into that, because surely if that was something I was yearning for, somebody else must be too. Yeah. And it turns out there's a lot of people right now craving that thirst, that connection, that something deeper. Yeah. You know, and we help people along the way.
Yeah, I get it, mate. I think our society is more disconnected than ever before. You know, we think with the internet, with smartphones, with all this technology we've got that's meant to be making us more connected, I think we've just become more and more disconnected. And that's not only disconnected with each other, but it's even just disconnected with ourselves. Along this conversation, you've talked a little bit about doing the work, and you've talked a little bit about tools. You know, in this last little bit of our conversation, can you talk to us about maybe a little bit about the doing of the work, or some of the tools that you use to help people go on this journey?
Yeah, sure. So just to break it down, because I'm sure people like both fitness backgrounds, right? I always look at the kind of terminology used now is spiritual athlete, right? So imagine you want to like start weightlifting and become a spiritual athlete, where you get to this unshakable point, this unshakable faith, this unshakable connection, and go through life. And yet, if you can't, lift a broomstick and you see somebody Olympic lifting, you just think, holy shit, that's just fucking night and day away, right? That's not me. But the reality is, we want to build enough strength to make a practical support in our lives. So as we move through a week or whatever. So anyway, you've got then tools that are like going to the gym, which I feel are a necessity and a practice, where you keep stacking the bar. And then you got what's called incidental fitness, as you know, right? Starting to find ways throughout your day to nurture that. Because as my old mentor would always say to me, it's not what you do with your eyes closed is true meditation. It's actually what you do with your eyes open for the rest of the day. People can meditate and still be dickheads. Don't forget, right? So it's then marrying those things up, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's when incidental, you can start to create what are called metacognition cues. So things you can have post-it notes stuck around, things that are going to bring you present again. So I like to question everything. So when you find yourself reacting or just acknowledge something, question yourself, is this mine or is this an inherited belief? So straight away, you can start exploring yourself. But the key is starting to become aware enough to notice that you're doing it. And the only way you're going to do that is get slightly obsessed initially in the first stages. Okay. So start questioning things, because at the end of the day, you're not going to lift the Olympic bar if you haven't practiced lifting at all. So you got to do manageable things. The second thing I would definitely encourage is a gratitude practice, and that's not to journal or just write things down. I'm grateful for my wife, my dog, my children, and just go through the motions. But it's actually to close your eyes and maybe step outside and feel your feet on the earth. Feel the breeze on your skin. Be still. Create space. And actually start to visualize and conjure up anything that you can truly feel grateful for. And that can be really challenging for a lot of people. That can be really hard. Because what happens is, over time, what we're wanting to do is create the body in such an environment that the body will do anything if you give it the parameters, if you train it. And it's no different. We can be, as a society and people, what I found that come to our events are addicted to stress. They're addicted to things that they're addicted to their thoughts. They're addicted to the foods they eat, and they're all creating state changes. So they don't actually have to overcome the addiction. So when you actually ask someone to be still, they're coming against a craving body that will conjure up all sorts of beliefs and stories to not actually sit with themselves and be in that place to diffuse the addiction in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we've got to. So actually ensuring that you get out there or start to practice those feelings, because at the end of the day, you're always going to find something to drag you into the old self.
Yep.
That's why personally I think retreats are amazing, because you get somebody out of an environment for 5 days or a week, and you can really, really start to embed some great resources and then experiences, so they build up muscles, so they become stronger when they go back into their life and have the confidence to start creating the changes. But then the other one is creating space, turning your phone off, creating environments where you start to ponder and think of, not even think, but just be. Like, notice how often you might pick up a phone if you're just bored or waiting for someone, or if you're standing in a queue. Like, we want to fill out time with this insatiable information overload to keep us distracted from the person that's wanting to reveal ourselves. And if you continue to do that, you're never really going to get to know yourself. You're never really going to get to know the elements that are craving your attention from your body. And just remember, the body is so wise. It's amazing. We just need to set up the right environments and start to listen, so it can reorganize itself in the way it chooses to support you long term.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I really like what you said there. I think there's some great tools and some great opportunities that you've presented there. I'm curious to know, like, what sort of transformations are you seeing in people? So people who are ready to do this work, because you've talked about the fact that you've got to be ready to put in and do this work. But if they are, and they do like the retreat, and then they stick around and they do more work afterwards, like, what sort of transformations or experiences are people taking away from this journey?
Yeah, all sorts. At the end of the day, they can show up in many different ways. And like any transformation, the transformation is tangible, but then we need to keep nurturing it. So we see physical things. So we've had, funnily enough, over the last 3 retreats, we've seen frozen shoulders that have been like that for years, or they're having injections for pain, clear up because they've healed grief from their heart, for instance, which is a physical that is very tangible. It's like, wow, the body's holding emotion there, and I don't want anyone to get misconstrue this either. I believe that we need to address the physical, the mental, emotional, and the spiritual. All aspects need to be nurtured. Same with a lady with she had severe back pain for about 18 months, and she was booked in for spinal surgery 3 days after our retreat. Came to the retreat as a last ditch to see if she could move, because she had an inkling there was an emotional connection, and she's still pain-free to this day, 7 months later. So But that again is from having the diligence of continuing to go to the spiritual gym on a daily basis and really nurture these aspects. We see relationships healed. We see like if you want to change your circumstances, change your energy. And I know that sounds, if you start getting deeper on this, there's a resonance within us, and that resonance, that vibration, if we start to shift those states into a much more state of being, peace or love, like we have people have experiences like, how else can you say it? Connection with the divine. Like, not, I think we did a survey on a couple of our retreats, and about 98% of the participants said that they felt fully connected to the divine at some stage in that. And through those connections, you're shifting states. So then when you go back home, they might go, shit, my kids see me differently now. And it's just because the way I'm being, career changes, whatever it might be. If you think about whatever you're stuck at and you're trying to resolve externally and you're coming up against yourself, then maybe it's time to go inward and try a different approach. And then, who knows what might come of it. Clarity of insight is huge for us. Yeah. So people just go, fuck, it was there all along. I just never saw it.
It must be a pretty incredible feeling to help people, overcome pain if it's physical pain, but also just overcome those blocks and overcome those hurdles through the work that you do, Guy. It's a beautiful story. And thanks very much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, it is. It's huge. But there's a caveat to that. I love helping people that are ready to help themselves. Mm. So that's the thing. Some people will come, mainly to the one-day workshop, and I'm not ready to take responsibility for my actions yet. and it might take them another year, 2, 5, before the pain might need to get greater first before taking the next step. Yeah. But why wait?
Yeah, that's it, mate. Get on top of it ASAP. If people want to find out more about you, Guy, what you do, whereabouts can they find you?
Yeah, we got, so all the retreats and events is Live in Flow. So if they look up liveinflow.co, and if they want to dive down a rabbit hole and jump into my podcast or whatever, just type my name, Guy Lawrence Podcast, and I'll keep you busy for a while as well.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Down the rabbit hole, as you say.
Yeah.
Awesome, mate. I really appreciate your time today and you sharing that story with us. It's really an incredible journey that you've been on. And I think, there's a lot more that we need to explore in that area to start to understand, all the spiritual stuff and the healing that can come from all that stuff. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome, mate. Thanks, Stretch. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Midlife Mavericks podcast. Remember, your journey to optimal health and vitality doesn't end here. You're just getting started. Keep embracing the mindset of a maverick. Stay committed to your visions, values, and goals. Continue taking meaningful steps towards a life filled with energy, purpose, and fulfillment. Until next time, keep thriving and living life on your own terms.